am back with more true crimes of Criminal Minds. I'm sorry I'm late this week. Let me tell you a little something you might not know about Florida. I don't know how it got the name Sunshine State, because during the summer it rains every day, and I am not exaggerating. So I have fibromyalgia and arthritis, and I have been under the weather because of the weather for a few days, but I am back now and ready to talk about true crime. Hope you guys had a wonderful week, better than mine. First, 2 warnings. You should know them by now. Number 1, spoiler warning. I will try not to spoil anything, but I make no promises. And 2, trigger warning. And this one is a bad one, y'all. This has a lot of female victims. It's about a serial SA. I'm going to use the abbreviation. I hope you guys know what I'm talking about. So, the 4th episode of Criminal Minds, Season 1, is called Plain Sight. There is a serial SA committer person, the R word-ist, in San Diego. The BAU goes out to catch this guy, and they call him the Tommy Killer. And someone says, why is he called the Tommy Killer? And somebody says, well, you know that rock opera? He glues their eyes open. Okay. I have no idea what that means. None whatsoever. I don't know of any rock operas unless you count Rent. So, I don't know why they call him the Tommy Killer and what it has to do with him gluing their eyes open. So, let me know down in the comments, because I feel really ignorant right now and I would really like to know why they call him the Tommy Killer. So, that's it for the show. That's all I'm going to talk about the show. I wanted to do cases that are not well known, cases that I really had to dig deep and do a lot of research for my own edification. Because if you remember, and I think I said this back in episode 1, that the plan was to do this by myself, but I changed my mind and decided to discuss it with you guys so I could get some feedback. And I haven't got any feedback yet. I know y'all are watching. I only have 4 subscribers, very few likes, but I have a lot of views. So, do me a favor and subscribe, hit that thumbs up, and give me some comments and let me know what you think about the episodes, or about me, or my presentation, or whatever. That's why I'm doing this here on YouTube. So I thought this case was not a well-known one because I had never heard of it before. So I got into my research, and there is a Pulitzer Prize winning article written about this case that turned into a book that then turned into a mini-series on Netflix. The mini-series is called Unbelievable, and I did my research on the non-fiction articles and documentaries that I found, but I did watch the mini-series. And then after the mini-series, I went back and rewatched some of the documentaries. Now, I watched 48 Hours. The episode Hunted is about this guy. I also looked at an article on refinery29.com that was basically, it laid out the time frame that this happened in chronological order. And the Daily Mail and the Times magazine, and I got some pictures off of IMDb. As always, Wikipedia. Actually, what I did, I went to Wikipedia and I put in serial essay, and there is a list. And so I picked this guy. Then I found out about the Netflix miniseries, which is very good, and I do recommend. And there is also a YouTube channel called Miss Mojo. It's primarily entertainment type news. And they actually did an episode on the miniseries about all the things that they got right. So from my nonfiction research and then the miniseries, there's not a lot of things that, when you watch these kind of things, you're like, oh no, that didn't happen that way, and that didn't happen that way. And I could not find anything in this that I could explicitly point to and say, that didn't happen. So let's go ahead and get started. Mark O'Leary is the name of this guy. And he would prowl around at night and pick an apartment that he wanted to go into. If there was an unlocked door, open window, anything like that, boom, that was his invitation. So he went into these houses and apartments repeatedly, like the same one, repeatedly at night, with the women asleep in their bed and having no clue that this guy's even in their house. He knows everything about them, when they go to work, when they come home, who's there with them, where they go to the gym, whatever. Like, he's stalking them. He knows their whole entire schedule, everything they do, everywhere they go. And he did an interview with the FBI after they apprehended him. And I'm sorry, I just cannot deal. Like, I love true crime. I'll watch it all day long. But I don't like the interviews because they're all just like, oh, I did this and I did that. And it's such horrible things. And they're talking like, oh, I went to the grocery store and bought a loaf of bread. That's the tone of voice they're using to tell about these horrible, horrible things that they did. And I just can't take it. So apparently there is, the full interview with him is on 48hours.com. If you're so inclined. I'm not. But he did say that it was not about power and control for him. It was about fear. He had a girlfriend at the time, and he couldn't perform with her because he needed that fear to get excited. And his girlfriend would pretend to be scared, but even that didn't work because he knew it wasn't real. Okay, so unbelievable is the story of Mark O'Leary. But the unbelievable part comes from the first victim. That may not have been his first victim, like, we don't know. He told another victim later on, after we know he'd already hit at least 2 or 3. He told one of them that was his first rape, which obviously was a lie. So Marie lived in Linwood, Washington. She was 18. She'd been in and out of the foster care system her entire life. When she was 16, she was placed with Shannon in her foster home in an emergency situation. She had been being abused at her former foster home. So she went to Shannon's in an emergency situation. They were full. They could not keep her long term. So then after that, she went to Peggy. So from 16 to 18, she lived in Peggy's foster home. When she left the foster care system, she lived at a place called Project Ladder. And it was an apartment complex, like subsidized housing for foster kids to help them get on their feet, become independent, and transition into adulthood. So on August 11th, 2008, Marie wakes up to see a masked man in her bedroom. He has a blue backpack. Out of that backpack, he takes a blindfold and a condom. He got a knife from her kitchen to threaten her with, and her own shoelaces to tie her up. So this went on for several hours. When he was done, he left. She got up and called her foster mom, Peggy. He took anything that he touched. He took the linens off the bed. He took their clothes. He took anything he touched, and anything that he couldn't take, he wiped down. So he left nothing behind that could identify him. So after Marie calls Peggy, then she calls a friend, and her friend is the one that actually called 911. So the cops come, then the detectives come, then she goes to the hospital to get the SA kit done, and the detectives wanted her to go back to the police station when she got done at the hospital so she could write up her statement. So she did go to the police, but she said that she was very tired. Could she please come back another day? So they said fine. So the next day, she goes in and she writes down everything that happened. Meanwhile, Peggy has called the cops. The detective on the case goes to Peggy's house. Peggy says, I wanted you to know this information. I don't want it getting back to Marie. She proceeds to tell him about her whole foster care history, her horrible parents, everything she's done up till now. And she said she does what Peggy called look at me behavior, attention-seeking behavior, which might not be a great thing, but I can understand it. Someone that's been shuffled around from home to home to home their whole entire life, they don't have an identity. So yeah, look at me. So I get that. But Peggy tells the cop that she thinks Marie made it all up. So now her story is starting to be questioned. Also, the detectives talked to her friends, and there was some discrepancies, small discrepancies, in the story that she told and the story that her friends told. Now, remember, her friends didn't witness any of this. They were only telling the cops what she had told them. So he was like, well, I guess she's telling her friends a different story than she told us, so, and then her foster mom thinks she's making it up, so of course she made it up and it can't be true. So the next day, they call her back into the police station. They make her write up another statement that says she made it all up. And they pressed her and convinced her, and Shannon didn't believe her either. They said, Shannon doesn't believe you, Peggy doesn't believe you, your friend's stories don't match your own. And they convinced her that she made it all up and that she needed to recant the statement that she made about being SA'd and write what really happened was that she made it up. So she writes up that it was a dream, and it was so vivid of a dream, she believed it actually happened. Well, then the detectives were mad at her again. They were like, no, that's not what you told us. You didn't tell us anything about a dream. You said you made it up. So then she had to do another statement that said she made it up. On the 18th, and I'm still not really sure what the purpose behind this visit was, but two of her counselors from Project Ladder, her housing development or apartment complex or whatever you want to call it, they go with her to the police. I'm thinking probably for her to recant again and say, no, it did really happen. And once again, the cop said, no, you made it up. So then she got in trouble with her housing and was kicked out. They made her apologize to everybody for lying and then was kicked out. So she got treated like a criminal. By the end of August 2008, she got a citation for false reporting a crime. The public defender got her a deal. She got a year probation, mandatory counseling, and a $500 fine. So now she has nobody. Nobody believes a word she says anymore. She had to borrow money from her foster mom to pay the $500, so now she owes her foster mom $500. So, really bad situation. But, as far as they're concerned, over and done with. In October of 2008, a 63-year-old woman is essayed in Kirkland, Colorado. And her foster mom, Shannon, sees it on the news. And she urges Marie to call the police and tell them, this is exactly what happened to me. At this point, though, she's afraid to, and I don't blame her. I think at this point, I would be like, okay, it's all over and done with. I'm not in trouble anymore. They can just leave me alone, and I can deal with this in my own way, however. So, I understand her not wanting to go to the police and saying, look, that's what happened to me. But Shannon was kind of insistent that she go to the police. Now, what I don't know, and this is one of the very few things that was not cleared up in any of the nonfiction research I did, in the miniseries, Shannon is actually the one that calls Kirkland, Colorado police to tell them that a similar attack took place in Linwood, Washington in August. So, in the miniseries, it was Shannon. In the research that I did, it said that somehow Kirkland, Colorado found out about the Linwood, Washington incident. So, I'm not really sure how they found out. But, at any rate, Kirkland, Colorado PD called Linwood, Washington PD, and they said, of course, oh no, that didn't happen. Say it with me, she made it up. What a piece of work these detectives were, man. In October 4th of 2009, a whole year later, a 65-year-old widow was essayed. And he took the bed linens, pajamas, everything he touched, wiped down everything he touched. He accidentally touched a teddy bear, though, and apparently did not realize it. So they got his DNA from that teddy bear, but still, they had no one to match it to. So they had his DNA, but it wasn't really doing them any favors at this point. In July 2010, I love this one. I mean, not that somebody broke into her house, but she was so smart. She didn't get SA'd because she did this. He broke into her house. She's in bed. She wakes up, guy with a black mask. And she starts calling a man's name. This is going in a file cabinet up here. If I ever find myself in a sketchy situation, this is what I'm gonna do. The struggle is real, y'all. Women are in much more danger than men are. So, if it ever happens to me, I'd be calling out a name. But anyway, she called out a guy's name. He went to look for this guy because he stalked these women. He'd already been in her house. He already knew her routine. But what if he missed something? Oh no, what if there's a guy staying here tonight? So he goes in the other part of the house to look for the guy she called. In the meantime, she jumped out the window. Now, she hurt herself really, really bad. She ended up in the hospital. She had broken ribs, punctured lung, broken leg, broken arm. I want to say collarbone. Like, she shattered some bones. This was a hard fall out this window. But she was able to pick herself up and make it to the neighbors to call 911. Now, they didn't catch this guy at the time. But this lady, I'm just so proud that she was able to not get SA'd because she used her brains. So at that scene, the only thing left behind was a strange honeycomb pattern on the window. and they had no idea what it was. They just knew that it was not left there by anybody who was normally in that house. It was a totally foreign image to anything, and they couldn't place it, but they knew it was a clue. In August 2010 in Westminster, Colorado, Edna Hendershot is the detective that got an SA case, and it was a 59-year-old woman that had her house broken into, and she was SA'd. He took her linen, her pajamas, wiped everything down, but this time he made her get in the bathtub. He had a kitchen timer that he set. The miniseries says 20 minutes, but I don't know if that's actually true or not, but he did set a kitchen timer and told her not to get out of that bathtub until the timer went off. And they were able to pull some of his DNA off of that timer. Also, at this scene, you had another honeycomb pattern on the railing in snow, and a footprint at the scene that they linked to an Adidas shoe. The next SA case was in Golden, Colorado, and the detective with that one was Stacy Galbraith. Stacy and Edna, these two detectives, they are the rock stars. They are the heroes of the story. They're in the 48-hour documentary, and there's also some little snippets I found on YouTube of them giving interviews. And if it was not for them, these cases would never been connected and never been solved, because what the guy did, he hit once in a city or a county, just once, and then he moved on to another jurisdiction because he knew that the different jurisdictions did not talk to each other, and he figured this was the best way for him to get away with it. And it worked for a while. January 5th, 2011, 26-year-old was broken into, guy with a black mask. He also took pictures of his victims. And this case, he actually brought pink high heels with him to dress her up. And he took pictures. And this was another smart woman. She would keep him talking, so he'd stop what he was doing. He wouldn't do it anymore. And he would talk to her and answer questions about himself. So from the types of questions she asked and the answers she got, they thought this guy, he's either a cop or he's military or former military. She also saw a birthmark on his leg. He took pictures of her with a pink Sony CyberShot camera. He tied her up with her own hair ribbon that he did not get then. He got it in one of his earlier excursions through the house, and he actually stole the ribbon, and she had went looking for it and knew it was missing, and he brought it back to tie her up with. He was taking pictures with a pink Sony CyberShot camera, and that camera was stolen from the Westminster crime scene. He took pictures of them before he stole that specific camera, so he had another camera at some time. But he stole this camera from the Westminster victim and then used it to photograph his other victims. So Stacy goes home and she's talking to her husband about her day, as you do, and we got this really bad SA case. And her husband was a cop in Westminster, Colorado. And he was like, we had an SA like that. Why don't you talk to Edna and compare notes? So the next day, Stacy Galbraith emailed Edna Hendershot, and they started comparing notes. By the end of January, they had linked 4 of the assaults. The one where the woman got away had the honeycomb pattern on the window. The one in Westminster had the footprint and the honeycomb pattern. The one in Golden had a footprint for an Adidas shoe. The assault in Aurora, Colorado, the DNA from that teddy bear matched the DNA on the kitchen timer in the Westminster case. So they've connected these 4. They teamed up with the FBI and a detective from one of the other scenes and had this huge task force now to try to go catch this guy. The amount of DNA that they found was so minuscule that the test that they did, it was called a YSTR. I know nothing about DNA. I know a little bit about genetics from being a nurse, but as far as DNA and DNA testing, I don't really know that much. I know you get half your DNA from your mom and half from your dad. So with the YSTR, what it is there's such a small amount, it's only going to do the male DNA. So let's say you had a dad and then he had 2 sons, and you took the DNA from all 3 of them and you ran it through a YSTR, they would be identical because it just goes by the father's DNA. Familial DNA is the one where you get the DNA has to match with the mom. This is just for the male, and it's a much smaller sample amount that they need to get the test done. So because they found all of this, they still didn't have a name. They still didn't have a guy. So there was a tech that noticed this 1993 white Mazda pickup truck on the surveillance videos at these apartment complexes. At the Golden site, he drove by 11 times in one night. There was a broken window, and I believe it had, a broken mirror, and it had some kind of distinct markings on it. They looked at every 1993 white Mazda truck in the state of Colorado, and they found his. And because of the unique markings, which they weren't explicit about, so I'm not sure what they were, but the distinct markings on the truck meant that it was the only one of its kind. So they were able to find the truck, pull the registration, and get a name and an address. And the name they get is Mark O'Leary. They go to his house and they stake it out, and they see him and a woman coming out of the house. They get into the truck and they drive off. So one set of detectives follows the truck, and the truck goes to a diner, and they're like, oh great, we got him now, get his DNA and match it to our crime scenes. So they waited till he was done eating, and then they went and they got the cup and they put it in a baggie to take back to the lab. In the meantime, the detectives that are still at the house, they want to make sure that there's nobody in there, nobody else in there that's a victim or in danger, and they want to know how many people are in the house. So in order to find that out, the only thing they could do was go knock on the door, but they were ready. They had a flyer with a picture of a guy from another case that was open. And so they knocked on the door. A man comes to the door, looking very much like the man that just left. And they show him this picture, and they say, we're detectives, there's this open case, have you seen this guy? And the man says, no, I haven't. So then she says, okay, well, can we just have your name for the record? And he says, Mark O'Leary. And they're like, okay, thank you. And then they're like, oh crap moment. Oh my gosh. Who were the other detectives following? Well, it ends up they were following Michael O'Leary, which was Mark's brother. And they look very, very much alike. So they ran his DNA that they got from the diner, and it matched the DNA from the crime scenes. Now they had a problem. They had 2 potential unsubs. But if you remember, the victim in Golden, Colorado saw a birthmark on his leg. So they got a warrant to search the house. And Stacy Galbraith herself lifted up the guy's pant leg and saw the birthmark. And they arrested him. Then they searched the house. His brother lived there at the house with him and knew nothing about what was happening. He had trophies, stockings, underwear, that kind of stuff in his house. He had hard drives with pictures of his victims. There are still hard drives that they assume have pictures on them, but it's encrypted and they cannot get into these at all. They've tried everything. They've gone to Quantico, they've gone everywhere for experts to try to break the encryption, and it cannot be done. But they did find some photos on a hard drive that they could get into, and on it was a picture of Marie. Now, this guy, all criminals are pretty stupid. Like, that's how they get caught, because they do something stupid. This guy, he took a picture of her torso, right? Like, no identifying features at all, just a torso. But he put her learner's permit on top of her belly when he took the picture. So they knew it was of her. And then they did find other pictures of her as well as the Westminster and the Golden cases. So they called Linwood, Washington, and said, look, we just apprehended a serial SA person, and we think that he actually has a victim in your neck of the woods. So the detective flies out to Colorado, looks at all of the evidence, and says, yeah, we thought she was making it up. So now he knows for sure she wasn't making it up. So he goes home, and I'm not quite sure how she was presented with this information in reality. In the miniseries, the detective went to where she works. I kind of don't think that would happen, but I would think they would call her back in. But at this point, would you go back in? Like if they said, oh, guess what? Somebody caught your SA guy. I mean, what are you going to do? Told you so. So anyway, at any rate, however way they told her, they apologized to her, told her that her record was expunged, they know now that she was not lying, and they gave her her $500 back. That was it. Her $500 back that she gave them to begin with. And she's lost job, home, friends, so much, everything, because they said she was making it up. Mark O'Leary pled guilty, and he received 327 and a half years in prison. That was for the Westminster, Golden, Aurora, Lakewood, Colorado. They still had to do the Kirkland, Colorado, and the Linwood, Washington one. So he pled guilty to those as well, and he got 28 and a half for Linwood, Washington for Marie's assault, and 40 years for the Kirkland assault. So this guy is never going to see the light of day again. And Marie got a lawyer, sued the city of Linwood, Washington, And they settled out of court for $150,000. Now, of course, her attorney wanted more. He said, we can get double that without going to court. And she said no. She wasn't greedy. She said, no, that's enough for me to go someplace else, start my life over again, and put all this behind me. And that's what she did. And she is married with 2 kids now. I don't know where she is. I don't know her real name. I just know Marie's her middle name. And so, like I said, I consider that a happy ending for Marie. Not really a happy story at all, but I'm glad that I'm sad that she had to go through that, but I'm glad that, yes, someone did finally say, yeah, she's telling the truth. So, like I said, this was a bad one, but interesting and a very good miniseries. If you have Netflix and you want to watch it, it's very, very good. So that's all for this week, guys. I will be back next week with another episode of the True Crimes of Criminal Minds. As I said earlier, subscribe, like, hit that bell for notifications, and I will see you next time.